Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Andy with Integrity Data Insights, and I help other companies with their reporting and analytics needs. And I'm super excited to have my guest today, Pete Blackshaw. And Pete's had a really storied career. He's worked for P&G and Nestle and Centrifuge, I guess it's called. And now his latest venture, he is the co-founder and CEO of BrandRank.AI, a local startup right here in the Cincinnati area. So, Pete, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Super excited.
Yeah, so let's jump in. Pete and I met, I guess, about earlier this year. And Pete does a lot of talking about AI, and really does a great job of communicating with it. And so, you talk about search is changing, right? It's from Google with getting a bunch of different answers to what you call the answer economy, which I think is a great way of summing it up. Maybe tell us more about what you mean by that.
Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of fancy words. There's a lot of tech jargon. There's a lot of sex and sizzle around AI, but I've really tried to simplify what's going on from a pure consumer perspective. And I think all of us can relate to it. We call the LLMs answer engines, and that is in fact the number one way that consumers and others are using these tools to answer questions. And they're brilliant at it. And it's why they're taking off. It's why the adoption is on a march to the northeast corner. And so I say that we're in an answer economy. And I think the winners and losers in the marketplace are the brands that actually do the best job of answering questions for consumers, and the brands that are most attentive to how they are being answered. And a lot of brands simply do not have any clue what the AI engines are saying about them. And most of the answer engines are much better than the brands themselves at answering questions, which creates a lot of complexity for brands. If anything, brands to be effective need to control their narrative. And in fact, AI engines are kind of, running away from them on that front.
It's got to be terrifying. I mean, because like in a typical, I mean, it's still not gone yet, but I mean, in a typical thing, brand had a little bit more control kind of over, like the user kind of had a choice. And I think you call it the prompted moment of truth. Tell us maybe about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really big idea. In fact, what I often say is that your brand is a smoothie, and all these ingredients are coming together, and they are being surfaced to the consumer or the buyer or the shopper at what we call the prompted moment of truth. And maybe what I can do is one of our interns, Anna Sullivan, proud Miami graduate or student, did a brilliant job of capturing this in a 1-minute video. Do you mind if I share it?
I think I see it. Okay, yeah, let me try to
have
add
it
that.
there. See if you can get it to play.
Yeah, let's try it.
When it comes to generative AI answer engines, your brand is a smoothie. The fresh fruits symbolize your core brand values and mission. The vegetables, customer reviews and feedback. Yogurt adds to the sweetness of successful campaigns. Good customer service especially contributes to the mix. All those ingredients go into the blender of generative AI search. When consumers use generative AI to find products, they get a mix of all the things being said about a brand in a single blended response. If your ingredients are good, you get a delicious smoothie and a positive output about your brand in AI search. Now, what happens if some of those ingredients aren't ideal? Negative reviews, poor content readiness, a PR crisis, and misleading information can enter the mix as well. Now that smoothie maybe doesn't taste quite as good. This blended answer is what we call the prompted moment of truth. Consumers see this combined result when they search for brands in generative AI answer engines. Your wins, your flaws, and everything in between.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, that is so true. Because like, yeah, back in the day, it's you're basically given, one answer, whereas you used to get, a bunch of different options. So
Yeah, I mean, if they type in Andy Murphy, podcaster, and they're going to have a description. And then the question is like, how did they make that smoothie? What was the primary ingredient? It might have been your website. It might have been a review that you received. It might have been a good piece of PR. Oftentimes it is like your brand website that we've generally found that is the number one algorithmic anchor kind of impacting your AI results. And you just need to know that. You can't afford not to know that. And you got to know if someone's throwing garlic into your smoothie, which is often what happens with brands. When we talk about the prompted moment of truth, we're talking about the purchase cycle. This is when consumers are deciding whether they should take a product seriously, try a product. And if the smoothie tastes horrible, then they're just never going to try the product. If it tastes good, that's critical. It's also visibility figures into it as well, because if you are a mom and you're saying, I want the best baby product, or I want the safest, infant formula, whether your brand shows up or not is a big deal. And a lot of brands get the deafening sound of silence at the prompted moment of truth. And what's even trickier is you can't buy or manipulate your way into the smoothie. And so it's not like, search 1.0 is a complete mess. It's a 90% market share game. If you don't like the results, you can buy advertising, but it's so bad these days that, you have to go, 20 searches below to kind of even find anything that's organic. And so it doesn't have as high a trust factor. And I do think the LLMs have been hyper attentive to build trust because they're all in competition to be the single source of truth. And so they are making good efforts to ensure that the results are believable, credible, and the like. And I think they're doing but for a few hallucinations that I think are just kind of come with the turf as these things evolve. I think they're generally, doing a really good job.
Okay. So say you're a brand manager, you manage one of these brands and the smoothie comes back with something that either you don't like or that you want to try to change. What can people do about it to kind of to change what goes into the smoothie?
Well, some of it, yeah, it's a good question. There's two ways to answer that question. Sometimes when you look in the mirror, it is what it is, right? It's like your brand's not very attractive, and that's because, or it's not a brand that performs well. And some of that's just true. And you just got to know that AI is amplifying your truth. So you may need to fix the product. We see a lot of that with sustainability. It's like AI is arguably the world's greatest BS detector. So when brands push the boundaries of we're green, we're sustainable, our carbon footprint is X, the AI engines are so smart, especially those more recent versions which do these advanced reasoning, they can basically challenge your purported scientific claim. And so what that means is that brands need to go back to the drawing board and fix their product. Now, in some cases, and we do a lot of consulting against this, brands are missing opportunities to tell their stories. So for example, stay on sustainability.
Okay.
Brands share very little relevant, useful data about sustainability on their websites. In fact, a lot of brands put their sustainability information that they've worked so hard to develop in PDFs or in other areas on their site that are not discoverable by LLMs. Now that is a relatively easy fix, but you've got to train the organization to understand how algorithms think. In fact, when I've done a lot of executive board presentations, and what I often say is that the future of AI is really about understanding how to think and act like algorithms. And so how do these algorithms discover content? How do they give you credit? And some of it's very basic. In fact, I'm a big believer in the boring basics. And I know that's tricky because brands don't get industry awards and kudos or Ad Age headlines, but boring basics are like fix your website. I just recently wrote a letter to the organizers of Cannes Lions, and I said, hey, 2025 is the year that you got to give some type of recognition to brands that have good FAQs. Now, I'm sure a lot of agency folks want to wring my neck saying that is boring, that is not cool, that's not going to give me. But in fact, if you really want to help brands get more credit for their narrative, you need to provide relevant information about how products perform, how to instruct consumers on how to use the products. And you got to fill that FAQ. You got to make sure that website does not fire blanks. And you have to make sure that no-brainer information that consumers would want is available. Now, one of the challenges there is that, and I was kind of complicit in this when I was leading digital for Nestle, is that brand websites have not innovated for the last 10 to 15 years. I mean, you can look at any major company, except for maybe DTC and e-commerce, but generally brands have convinced themselves that consumers don't go to their backyard. They only go to social media. And so you've seen this wasteland of innovation, and that has severely punished them in AI search results, where you see a different story emerging. And again, we've audited thousands of brands, and it's fascinating. The younger upstart brands that don't actually have a lot of money for paid advertising are disproportionately over-indexing AI search results. And so they are very AI designed. Now think about it. If you and I were starting a CPG company and we were filling the whiteboard, we would say, wow, let's make sure that all of our user users know everything they can about the product. Let's make sure they appreciate the product is superior, it delights, it rewards, and let's make sure every question is answered, because that could be our last customer. And so they do it very instinctively. And so they are feeding the AI algorithms much bigger than the bigger brands. And this is what I generally found very, very fascinating. You've got almost like, I wouldn't say David and Goliath, but you've got an equal leveling of the playing field. And it's tough for the bigger brands because they're so burdened by paid advertising, legacy practices, almost like multiple layers of agencies and all that stuff. And it's really hard to get alignment. And the smaller brands are like, oh yeah, of course we would feed the algorithms information about how to use the product, why it's more nutritious, why it performs better. So it's really interesting when you helicopter up and you look at the data. That's what I love about being an auditor. It's like the auditing tells the truth.
Yeah. And I think this goes, I think I saw one poster, a video you put out recently where you kind of just say, you know, answer the damn question, I think, which is great. I love that, because so many people don't. You footprint it, you know, you paint pants around it. And then like, really, that's the best advice you could probably give for in this new world we're at.
Yeah, and listen, for those that are listening, if you don't believe me, if you think Pete's getting too righteous here, just go to any top 50 brand and type in a really obvious question like, is your brand sustainable? How does it actually work? Tell me about the ingredients. And it's either going to fire back a blank, or it's going to give you 500 irrelevant responses, or it's going to throw an e-commerce ad your way that they're hoping that you're going to click. So brands have lost the art of being relevant at that moment of truth. Now, the good news is that this is a really important discipline. To some extent, this is like an old-fashioned discipline. It kind of reminds me when I founded the first interactive marketing team at P&G, we called it interactive, not digital. And I do think the vernacular of interactive had much more discipline about being responsive to signals from consumers. I think over time, we all got really enamored with buying advertising at scale, and that obviously made sense, and that kind of lifted. But in terms of like really rewarding the engaged consumer, I think brands have fallen short. But the good news is that AI is like a free wake-up call. You know, everybody needs data to kind of motivate and kind of get them to the right place. And we're trying to use this data to really help CMOs and executives and executive boards realize that the stakes are really high for not getting this right.
Right. So that piggybacking on that same thing, a good segue is, you know, you kind of talk a lot about how AI is disrupting kind of the shopper's journey. And I think you were, you know, hitting on that a little bit, but maybe just give us a little bit more flavor on that and what you mean by that, those kind of statements.
Yeah, well, we generally found that, can I show you a slide real quick?
Yeah.
I uploaded a deck that it might be in there. Yeah, so if you jump ahead to a couple, I'll just show you kind of a money slide that I think will make my point. Can you forward it or no? Yeah, kind of jump ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, this is a go back.
3. Okay.
No, one more, please.
Yes, there you go.
So this is really, really important. Everybody should write this on their forehead, or send it to their boss. And we've been doing a lot of consumer research, and This was well over 1,000 rep panel consumers, and we have really been studying habits and practices of how consumers use AI. And again, it's not just consumers. I mean, every financial analyst uses it, every NGO uses it, every B2B customer uses it. But what we've found is that, the primary, one of the top uses of generative AI is researching products and services. So
yeah, wow.
And there are certain areas that obviously over-index, like electronics, or if you're a parent and you're really hypersensitive about safety and your child, you're going to do more than just go to Google. You're going to basically go to, AI. And I think now that AI is including attribution, as we saw with ChatGPT search, I think the confidence level in these tools are going to go up even more. But the key takeaway is that this has high consequence, right? I mean, this is the new shopper journey. And so what is said about your brand, positive or negative, has real consequences. And again, so if they're researching you and you've got a poor tasting smoothie or a good tasting smoothie, that moves the needle. And it's tricky, because if you're a CEO talking to the street and saying that we've got the best product on planet Earth, you should buy our stock because, everyone's going to buy it. And the analyst goes to AI and does a search and finds out that there's question marks about the brand, or it's getting bad reviews, or the smoothie tastes horrible. And then they go to another AI engine and they get the same thing. That's what kind of challenges the marketplace. And this is so it's not just consumers who may say, I'm going to buy or not buy, but you've got other critical stakeholders. For example, I work with a lot of retailers, and just about every single retailer has an AI team. And so they're getting really sophisticated at using AI to vet products. And so if I were running a CPG company or a major brand, I would be obsessed with making sure that I am always 3 steps ahead of the retailers, because they have not only the consumers, we got to know what the consumers want, but retailers might decide whether they put you on their shelf or not. And they're going to use AI to interrogate everything from overall brand proposition. Are you as green as you claim? Do you have dirty laundry out there that might potentially impact? And this is this new world of radical transparency. And it's my first startup, which I sold to Nielsen, was also in this area, but we were mostly monitoring social media commentary, and that also had an impact on purchase behavior, but not nearly as much as AI. I mean, AI is seeing a hockey stick growth unlike anything. On November 30th, we're all going to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT. 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years.
It's crazy
that
how much
outrageous growth.
It feels like 20, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, but if you're not convinced people are using this to buy, blink your eyes and suddenly they will be there. That's just how fast this is evolving.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're dead on. And I like, with the introduction of, more of the real time, where it'll go out of its, and search the web real time. That's, even made those tools even more tremendous. Tell us about, I know you guys worked on a AI powered holiday gift giving guide that was really cool. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I'll if you advance, I think I've got a couple slides there that kind of bring that to life. Jump ahead a couple. Go ahead.
To work on my left-handed
no problem.
Slide navigation. A little bit more. Here we go.
So, we're not going to announce this till tomorrow. But yeah, if you go to aishopperguide.com, you can kind of get a preview of it. But this was really interesting. And this kind of reflects the dashboard mindset. I mean, we're developing a SaaS dashboard that brands can put on their desktop to kind of measure where they stand and where they net out on the purchase thing. And so you get a little bit of a taste of it. So what we did is we, again, what makes our method unique is we look across all the different LLMs, including Amazon Rufus, which just kind of went to market recently or expanded. Yeah. And we took, I think, like 15 different categories: top gifts for moms, best gifts for teens, and, said, what product would you recommend? And it gives a very, very specific area. And in some cases, you see a bit of a unanimity. I didn't share the one about toys, but if you look at toys, Lego covers all of it. If you look at electronics, Apple iPads have a big share of voice. But this is an area where you need to, think about all the sales that are made in the holiday. And so if shopper research is playing a role in what fills the holiday basket, you got to know what is being said. So I would say for, ChatGPT has the largest market share of all the AI engines, and Willow Go breast pump is the #1 search. Now, sometimes you may ask it twice and it may come up with something different. What we try to do is hundreds of searches, so we kind of get to an average. But I would say Willow Go pump was consistently #1, and that's good news for them. Similarly for Burt's Bees. But this is the new shopper journey. Now, if you go to the next slide, what's particularly interesting about this is that if you look at our shopper guide, you'll notice there's 2 different buckets. One is just, 15 categories, all the LLMs, what do they recommend? And you do see some patterns, like what certain brands may have, certain LLMs may have an inclination towards certain types of products. But the second area was a lot more interesting, where we put 2 choices in front of every LLM. We sort of said, white shoes versus colorful shoes, bold tie versus, and this was interesting because when you aggregated all the data, you found that Claude and Meta are much more, actually Claude and Grok are much more aggressive and bold in choices. You could say they're more progressive. And ChatGPT and Llama were much more conservative. They always kind of almost like more of the tried and true. Right. And I think nuances are really important because brand builders need to understand, how do they optimize themselves in front of these tools? How do you feed content into them? How do you create advantages? And if the engines, if their algorithms are kind of moving in a different direction, you need to know that. And so this is one reason why we think our measurements are so critical. Now, if you go up to the top, I do want to say a word about what we measure. And I think this will excite your audience in terms of the types of things that you can do. I think it's like the second slide. I think it's the second slide in the deck. So if you go back, so these are what I would say the critical measurements. The first one is the BS test. Do the LLMs believe your brand promise? And so what we do here, and some brands, they always get mad at us first, but then they thank us afterwards, because generally we're kind of giving them the early warning before they get fired or before financial analysts find out. But we'll take a digital footprint of what the brands are promising on their website and their privacy statements, on their social media, and then we'll interrogate AI and say, do you believe it? And we'll look at the gap score. And so it's a 1 to 10 gap score. And if you're below an 8, then you've got some issues that might start to freak out your lawyers. And it's good to know. And some brands are so big, they don't really know. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is promising. And so alignment is a really, really big one. And I'm a trust junkie. I used to be the national chairman of the Better Business Bureau. Better Business Bureau is one of our first major customers. And so I think trust is the currency of advertising. It's the currency of purchase intent. And so brands need to really understand whether their claims are believable. Visibility, are you just visible or not? And again, this is also painful for a lot of brands who think they're leading the category. But if you type in something like what's the best beauty care product, and you get the deafening sound of silence, or some smaller market, brand is showing up, that can be very disruptive. But it's important to know. Vulnerability, is your prompted moment of truth confusing or losing shoppers? And this one's interesting because, ratings and reviews are huge inputs into the smoothie. Bad publicity, Wikipedia is a big part of it. When I was at Nestle, I was managing social media, and, that was complicated because a lot of legacy issues with Nestle related to supply chain or palm oil sourcing or, child labor would kind of haunt you in perpetuity. And that's kind of what happens with AI too. It just kind of keeps the topic alive. Attribution, what sources blend into my smoothie? Brands are always surprised by this. It's not the usual suspects. You may find that, Joe's car reviews is as important as a big car review company. And so this is where You just have to be eyes wide open about what's really driving impact. Instructional advocacy. I don't know if you've noticed, but AI answer engines are absolutely brilliant, thorough, empathetic at answering questions about how to use products. They're very step by step. However, most brands don't know this. In fact, brands don't do a very good job of this at all. You know, they kind of expect that you're going to read the fine print on the thing. Their search engines don't work. And so the AI engines are kind of stealing the prize from the consumers. But we do find that, especially in health, that there are conspicuous gaps between what the brands want to believe in terms of the instruction, how to properly use a product, and what the LLMs are doing. And I think it's important. I think it's even responsible for a lot of the brands to be very proactive in ensuring that the LLMs get the right story in terms of how to use the product. But again, going back to that point about websites, again, that's become a little bit of a wasteland of innovation. But if you wanted to score some immediate, if you thought that it was important for consumers to properly understand how to use products, you can score immediate wins by servicing your website with that content in a way that is much more liquid. Okay, don't put it
not the PDFs like you were talking about, or other things that it has a hard time getting access to.
Yeah, and then also doing it in a way that's relevant. And then readiness is your brand answer ready. And I think this is important. And listen, I think it's this is an area where I think AI is opening up a lot of opportunities at a low cost to answer questions for consumers. I'll give a good example. If you look at one of the video clips that I have here that says Nestle Italy.
Bei ricordi del tempo trascorso a lavorare con voi mentre ricoprivo il ruolo di Global Head of Digital presso Nestlé. Non vedo l'ora di discutere oggi su come costruire brand nell'era dell'intelligenza artificiale.
You can stop that. But listen,
è meraviglioso essere di nuovo qui.
Okay.
È meraviglioso essere di nuovo qui con i miei amici di Nestlé Italia. Ho tanti bei ricordi.
Okay, you can stop it. But listen, I think brands have always had excuses why they can't answer questions. I mean, the whole area of consumer affairs, one of the things I wrote about in my book, satisfied customers tell 3 friends, angry customers tell 3,000, is that, consumer services was kind of the neglected stepchild. It was considered a non-strategic cost center. CMOs really took attention. And anytime you brought anything like innovation, like, oh my God, who's going to pay for it? But in the world of AI, the cost of serving consumers has plummeted. And so, for example, in our dashboards that we've developed, we realize that you can't just dump data in front of brands. You have to make it inspiring, rewarding, engaging. And so with some of our dashboards for some of our top customers, we're including videos in multiple languages to explain how to use it. So that's why I started to use some of those tools that allow you to, and now we always disclose it, but honestly, you learn faster when someone's talking to you. But think about that from a consumer perspective. It's not only having the right information, it's the how. And I think we're in a renaissance of the how. And I think brand builders can no longer argue that, oh my gosh, it's going to cost an arm and a leg to answer a question for consumers in a more empathetic way. Now, if they stick to that position, then they are at risk that the AI engine are going to run away with that, because if anybody has not played with voice ChatGPT, it's incredible. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean, I was in Italy the other day when I was giving that presentation, and I used it like 100 times while I was driving through the vineyards and all the historic sites.
I remember reading about that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is an opportunity for brands, because if you want to drive growth, if you want to really, kind of like get people to use more products, you have to inspire more usage, and you need to and if you want premiumization, you have to take them to a whole different level of experience. And again, you can do that now without breaking the bank. I don't want to over romanticize the free. There's cost involved. There's people involved. But again, when I say answer the damn question, some of that is about get the right information to them, but some of it is also deliver it to them in a way that really has impact and dignifies their desire for sight, sound, and motion. The whole TV advertising business is anchored to a sight, sound, and motion premise. billions of dollars in market research has demonstrated that that drives greater impact. Why couldn't that principle apply to answering a question?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And just to make sure everybody, I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So we've talked quite a bit about it on and off, and I love all the insights, but maybe just tell us a little bit about what BrandRank.AI specifically does. Just so everybody's kind of on the same page with what all the great stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we work with, we're probably about 15 customers. We're only about 7-8 months old. And we provide a SaaS dashboard that meters and audits your brand standing and AI search results. Our unique moat is, in addition to our expertise over the years, is the fact that we're interrogating all the different engines. We've got quite a few proprietary metrics. We've developed a whole black box that can interpret it in a way that is actionable. We always tie it to action. So if your smoothie is horrible, here are 3 steps that you can take. We do things like we do a lot of content readiness audits. In fact, rather than talk about it, let me play the brand face-off audit.
Okay.
And this just gives an example of how our technology compares, like Unilever versus P&G. And we take pride in the fact that we monitor the industry. We'll always look at you relative to competition, whether it's a big player or small. But here's an example of some of the analytics that we can crank out.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so this is just one of the AI engines, and we're looking at content liquidity, search capital, algorithmic anchors, easy to understand content, authoritative content, technical content. We're looking at, and then we'll give them a score, which brand managers always like. We'll get very specific in the product performance in both, whether it's household cleaning products, personal care, sustainability. We'll look at value for money, product innovation, and then we'll kind of give a score. And then we get into the brand promise that kind of gets into some of the alignment. And then in some cases, we'll create like a side-by-side in terms of based on how those algorithms see you. It's interesting, like Unilever kind of gets a bit more credit than P&G does, fair or not, on green. They do actively promote that. It's rare that you would see the Unilever CEO not talking about sustainability. It's not that P&G doesn't, but they may be a bit more intentional about feeding the algorithms on that front. But again, that's kind of what we do at scale. And I mentioned those metrics that we focus on: visibility, alignment, vulnerability, instructional accuracy, and then readiness.
Nice. We do have a question too. I'm going to see if I can pop this up. It might be quite a bit to put on there, but we have a question from Mac. Yeah, so I'll just read it. But yeah, your unicorn is game changing. It's like you're building a new Google. How can anyone ensure ranking transparency given the speed at which these big AI engines are moving? Brands feed data into the AI. They'll always attempt to rank number 1, but pulling from consumer reviews and safety could make it more credible, especially for universal factors.
Yeah.
Like customer service and product guidance.
Yeah, great. Well, and I recognize the person. He's one of my favorites, Mac. I work with him a lot at Nestle,
awesome.
one of the great brand builders.
Question.
And I'm hoping he'll invite me to London very soon as I develop my model. And that's very generous of you to say unicorn. We're far from a unicorn. We've raised about $1.4 million. I'm deliberately not raising a lot of money, but we are going for institutional seed very soon. And, I promised myself as part of my startup, I would get as many customers as possible and great customers before I raise money. But listen, Mac, I think the one thing about this space that we've learned, it's very hard to manipulate. Now, it's not to say there isn't abuse, and I'm sure every agency on planet Earth is going to promise a secret sauce, PMOs, that we're going to help you get better visibility. And, and I do think we've had a tragedy of the commons in Search 1.0. I think, content farms, content factories, it's all kind of gone amok. And ironically, all that stuff has happened and brands still don't answer basic questions for consumers. So my advice is that, and here's the other thing to think about. The answer engines, which we study very carefully, are all in an arms race to be the single source of truth. So they are hypersensitive about perceptions of manipulation, being over-sponsored. Perplexity is probably the most aggressive because they're under massive pressure to develop a ad model, and we do see a higher level of generosity towards brands on that platform. But generally speaking, I mean, I think the reason why LLMs default to websites is because they know that is the first source of truth. They know that lawyers vet content. It's not like going to influencer sites where, the influencer might completely exaggerate, the health benefits of the product. I think brands generally are very, very conservative on their website. They have to, otherwise they'll get sued. And so they default to that. Tried and true sources like Wikipedia tend to over-index, obviously ratings and reviews. And I think, Amazon is obviously doing a lot of that with Rufus. I think Facebook and Meta, Llama, they're going to open up their walled garden to some of their proprietary data. You see some of that with Grok X, which I actually think has had a positive experience. And I think even they try to stay objective. If you ask a complicated question about Elon Musk, it doesn't necessarily throw back a lot of love. It plays back the complexity of that particular influencer.
Right.
And so,
right.
So it's a harder space to manipulate. Again, I may have egg on my face when you ask me that question in 6 months, but I would say what brands need to do is the boring basics. I mean, if an agency is saying, just build a content farm and let's not deal with the website, I'd say that's bad advice. And now it may require a lot more friction. It's a lot easier for certain agencies to just colonize the external space with content versus internal. You got to get more alignment. You got multiple stakeholders. And this is why I do believe that the CMOs play a very, very strategic role here. And I think even in some cases, CEOs need to be much more proactive here because, their reputations are also anchored to what the algorithms say.
I mean, do you think in a short time frame we will have kind of more ad driven injections in these
absolutely
tools?
No, again, I think we're seeing without Perplexity. Listen, I mean, Google is obviously experimenting a lot. There's no way they're not going to have some type of ad model, but I do think consumers have been in a very powerful habit, spoiled, if you will, by very elegant, ad-free, friction-free, 24/7 prompted moment of truth answers. So I think the ad models are going to have to build around that. There's some speculation that there will be ad models on the second activity. So when you go to Amazon Rufus and you say, what baby product should I buy? Then they will tee up supplemental questions that might allow you to go deeper. There's been some speculation that advertisers will be able to buy that. Maybe they'll be able to buy around it. Again, Google's probably been the most aggressive in coming up with a hybrid model because you've got both traditional search versus the single answer AI response. And then even AI, generative AI or open AI is moving to at least the search GBT is moving towards more of a hybrid model. So I think we should assume we'll have advertising, but I don't think it will be as dominant because I think there's too much of a benefit. Consumers like objective recommendations, and that's part of what we like about generative AI. We feel like we're getting, a faster beeline to the truth.
Right. And I think a lot of people, like myself included, you pay for it. It's some of these, even, it feels like it's just another Netflix subscription or whatever, added to the pile but what you get, it's definitely,
absolutely.
Feels
absolutely. I mean, that is a really unique characteristic. I often wonder if the ad space would be maybe a little bit cleaner if we had more subscription models on the front end, but it is what it is. But I do think, a lot of consumers are paying $20 a month for a very elegant, simple answer engine. And so they're going to have to be super mindful of how much they allow advertising to, get in the way.
Right. So a couple more questions. One, I just love your thoughts on what are some of your favorite LLMs, and what are some of the different things you like about each of them? Maybe just highlight a few that you
Yeah, I like
think are.
all of them for different reasons. So obviously, I think OpenAI has done a great job, and it's breathtaking how fast they're innovating. If you haven't heard the podcast with their head of product that was on Hard Fork last week, that was just incredible. They're kind of celebrating the 2-year anniversary, and that was super informative. And it's just an incredible learning curve. I give them a lot of marks for enterprise. We actively use the enterprise version. We built a lot of custom GBTs like a lot of folks. And I think those are really, really powerful. My team even created a custom GBT in Pete's style. Everybody says with the startup, oh my gosh, Pete, we can't scale Pete, and I say, yes, you can. You can.
That's great.
Everybody can have Pete in an AI world. You just got to build it in the right way. And I probably do have some predictable characteristics to that. But I do love the fact that, an AI ChatGPT allows you to do that fairly well. Listen, I think Google Gemini got some grief early on as they experimented. But, I think they're building a solid product, and I think they're doing a nice job of finding that integration balancing act. We'll see how that evolves. I think they did a brilliant job with Google Notebook LLM. And I love the fact that was kind of a skunkworks 10% innovation activity. Now everybody at Google is like touting it as though it was part of the original plan, when in fact they kind of stumbled into it. But I do think that was a real kind of breakthrough tool. So I think we're going to probably see some great stuff coming from Google. Listen, I think Perplexity has been a real, they don't have big audience, but they've got very influential audience. And there are a lot of folks, including a lot of older folks that I know that really like the tool. I think what's going to complicate life for them is the fact that one of their best characteristics, the attribution, has now been ported over to Search GBT. So if you didn't like OpenAI in a world where you had no clue about attribution, now you can look at it very, very, very clearly. I think Grok X is very good, and I think it's especially good on the image creation. I would probably give them my highest marks on image creation. I think Claude Anthropic thinks the best. They also summarize the best. In fact, sometimes you get mad at it when it's like, dude, you cut out too much of my copy. But then you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, they really did cut out all of the fluff. So I think they do a very, very good job. I think Llama's doing a nice job. I think, I think you don't hear as much discussion as I think they deserve on Meta Llama, but they're building a really powerful platform. And you can't underestimate Mark Zuckerberg when he basically says we're going to open up part of our walled garden, because obviously Facebook, the content assets they have are kind of unrivaled, right? And so
huge,
I think that'll be a really interesting space. I love Amazon Rufus. I think Amazon was relatively cautious initially, but they rolled it out. I love the fact that it's objective. I love the fact that it doesn't overdo it on product, buy this product. I think they're more like, how can we help you think about shopping? How can we help you think about the category, the need? I think they're doing a really good job, and we're doing quite a bit of work on that one. Copilot largely mirrors OpenAI, but more from an enterprise perspective. I probably don't spend as much time on that, as I do with OpenAI, enterprise. But, they're all good. And I haven't even gotten into some of the more niche ones like Pi. But among the big ones, those are the ones that I would highlight. And, but it's an arms race. I mean, it is. I mean, it is a very refreshing competitive environment. And unlike Google 1.0, where it's like 90% mark, it's almost like no competition, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
competition. Netscape kind of disappeared very quickly. And so we were always like stuck with one player. I think it's much more balkanized. And I like that. I think it makes the competition a lot more interesting.
Yeah, that's great. It makes me want to try out more of them. I'm kind of, that's maybe a good or bad thing about myself, is I'm kind of more a loyalist, right? So once I find something and I like and I stick to it, so I'd probably use ChatGPT more than anything. I also have a 365, like the Copilot, but like you said, it's kind of almost like a layer on top of it. But no, that gives me inspired to kind of try more of them out.
There's a lot of other just tools I use that, I'm obviously kind of, I use Otter all the time. I got this term called dog walk journalism. I'll take my beautiful dog on a walk and I'll kind of bark, pun intended, my deep thoughts into Otter, and then I'll dump it into ChatGPT. And before you know it, I've got an Ad Age article. I've been doing a lot more writing with Ad Age, and I'm not cheating. I'm not plagiarizing, but I am capturing my thoughts and my inspirations in a much more operational way, and of course, everybody's got a Steven Spielberg in them. It's just that it dissipates and we forget the thought. And I think AI is a great opportunity to kind of, capture that. And I think there's a lot, think of all the kids that are dyslexic or have learning disabilities, and where we've kind of shoved form in front of them, like you must write this 5-paragraph essay, and they give up, or they, and I think AI is a great offset. We may find brilliance in unlikely places. And that's something that I'm, really particularly excited about. I love, I don't know if the recording industry will like me to say this, but I love Suno. I've probably written 1,000 songs. If you ever have a birthday, I'm probably going to send it to you as a song.
Wow.
Versus a text that nobody's going to read. Oh yeah. I mean, listen, you want to get more credit, I'll type in a few little fun things about a friend, and then I'll pick a song and then send it to them. Like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? And I do, listen, I'm in that 10% that likes to know it first and tell it first. And Suno is just kind of incredible on that front. Having a lot of fun with studio,
I've heard about that. I'm actually trying to do some original stuff with my friends, so maybe we should check that out more. We'd probably be producing more songs more quickly as we're.
I should have prepared a song. I've been doing it like crazy. I mean, I'm like, it's almost out of control. It's like
that's fun though. I think I've heard one of them in one of your videos. I'm pretty sure, I'm guessing has one of them, because I was thinking, where did they get that song from? But I bet it's one you created. So
I've got BrandRank theme song. Well, one of the things that we do now is, again, remember what I said about the how. One of the things that I'll do to double down to make sure that everybody really reads my reports is I'll take, we'll obviously do kind of a brand essence or a brand equity assessment and then I'll kind of turn that into a song. Or in some cases, I've taken our very complicated report, not complicated, but in-depth reports, and I'll upload it into Google LLM, and I'll give it to a client as a podcast. And that's been crazy popular, even in some really, really big organizations where, they really struggle to just get brands to read stuff. I mean, compliance is everything, right? The doctor says you to, take the pill every day, and people are like, oh, what? But so you got to think of smarter ways to get them to like pay attention. And I do find the multi-sensory aspect of AI is, it's probably why your podcasts work, right? I mean, we could write it down and nobody would read it, or put it into a book and nobody would read it, but we're trying to bring it to life in a way that is more synced to how people listen on the go.
Right. I love that. Well, one last question I want to get into, just I've observed this about you, and I think it's great, is you seem really invested in the Cincinnati AI, AI space, and kind of trying to get Cincinnati known as kind of an AI hub. Tell us more about your efforts in that, and maybe, what drives some of your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, let me take a step back. I mean, I'm a California native. I went to school in the Silicon Valley, and in some respects, I had no business being in Cincinnati. But after I worked at Procter & Gamble, I decided to hang up my shingle in Cincinnati for a startup. And I bucked the conventional wisdom. Everybody said, dude, if you want to do a startup, you got to go back to Silicon Valley. I said, no, this is the consumer capital of the world. This is a town that has the world's largest advertiser and has the world's third largest retailer. There are some real consumer fundamentals here. We have a right to win. And I proved that hypothesis correct. We ended up selling that company to Nielsen. I located in OTR. And after I worked at Nestle for 8 years in Switzerland, I was thrilled to have a chance to kind of come back and see whether we could kind of scale that vision. And when I was working with Centrifuge. And so I think the potential to unlock value in the region is huge. And I do think there's something about Midwest values where responsible AI has the potential to thrive. I do think there's less hype here. I think, people want to do well, they want to get wealthy, but they're not, it's not over the top. And I think there's some really hard questions that we need to tackle around AI. And this is why I co-founded with Carl Frake, the Cincinnati AI Consortium, which really has responsible AI at the core. And I hope that, the region can have, 100 brand ranks that are kind of getting in front of these issues. I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm building is a trust broker. It wasn't a coincidence that we partnered with the Better Business Bureau first. I believe.
May have lost Pete for a second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go back up just a hair. It glitched out just for a few seconds, but if you can remember where you were.
No. Listen, I think there should be 100 brand ranks in our region. We are at our core kind of an accountability tool. We're a trust broker. We're a third-party credentialer, and I think that's a space where Cincinnati has a right to win. And think of all the things we're going to have to figure out to preserve the integrity of advertising. AI disclosure, transparency. Is it real or is it fake? There's a lot of ideas. Now, it does require certain things to happen, and I don't think we're quite there yet. Like when I took the job from Centrifuge, I thought, oh my gosh, the big companies are going to bear hug the startups and create value together. That turned out to be fairly naive. It's not that, I'm doing a lot of business with big cos, including some in our backyard, but I still think we need to figure out how to reduce the friction and convince big cos that they can move faster with greater urgency through that type of external focus. I do think a lot of the smaller companies bring disproportionate value to the table, but that's kind of a hard thing for large companies that are technically built for scale. But but I'm very, very bullish, and I would love to see the region really stick out its neck on responsible AI, trust, and the like. And we've got a great group that's out there that's committed to it. Some people have said we're as well or better organized than Boston and other ecosystems. So there's a real will and a passion out there. And I could list all the people that are contributing, but there's a lot of them. And and it kind of makes space more meaningful for me personally.
Oh, great. Yeah, I love all the work, all the Cincy AI, all the meetups and things. There's an energy about it. And I love what you've done to contribute to that. And so Pete, thank you so much again for joining us. So much to unpack here. It was a great time. What's the best way for people to learn more about you or connect with you if they want to learn more?
BrandRank.AI is a good way to learn about what we do. You can reach out to me, friend me on LinkedIn anytime. You can send an email to me at pete@BrandRank.AI. I love, obviously I make it a personal goal to thank or engage with 200 people online every week. And so let me know if you're having a good conversation, even if it's controversial. I'm kind of easy fodder to engage. And so sometimes that's the best way to get things going. If you're really into trust, you'll probably get me to respond a lot faster. But happy to help in any way. And if you're a big company listening in, we'd love to help you, kind of win in this space. In addition to doing auditing, we do a lot of training. In fact, I just got off a call a few minutes ago, and we're going to do, I'm going to partner with Kendra Ramirez. I've been recruited by all the nonprofits to help them onboard to AI. So we're going to do a huge year in review and nonprofits webinar in a couple of weeks. Cool. I'll find out what the date is and I'll share it with you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Cause my wife is a executive director of a nonprofit. So, she hears me talk about it quite a bit. So that's great. I'll definitely, thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely pass that along. But, well, Pete, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks. This has been great. And thank you all for watching. And if you didn't watch it live and you still have questions, put them in the comments, and we'd love to tackle those and engage with you further. So thanks again, Pete, and thanks for everyone for joining me.
Thanks for what you do. Bye-bye. How'd we do?